A friend suddenly becomes quieter. Someone reads your message but doesn't reply. A coworker seems irritated. You find out people met without inviting you. Someone disagrees with something you said. And almost instantly, your mind begins writing a story. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? Do they not respect me? Was I not important enough? What's interesting is that sometimes nothing has actually been explained yet. There is simply a gap in information, and your mind has placed you at the center of it. Emotionally mature people notice these moments too. They can feel confused, disappointed, or uncomfortable. They've simply learned that noticing someone's behavior and making that behavior about themselves are two very different things. If you enjoy exploring the psychology behind everyday behavior and becoming more self-aware, consider subscribing. That's exactly what we explore here. Psychologists sometimes use the word personalization to describe a tendency to interpret events as being connected to us, even when there may be other explanations. And it makes sense that we do this. Uncertainty is uncomfortable. The mind prefers an explanation to an empty space. So when information is missing, it searches through the material it already has. Your memories, insecurities, fears, previous experiences. Someone becomes quiet. That's the event. They're angry with me. That's the interpretation. Then anxiety arrives as the emotional reaction. But the event never actually told you what the interpretation claimed to know. This is why one of the most useful questions emotionally mature people learn to ask is surprisingly simple. What else could this mean? Start with other people's bad moods. You walk into a room and someone seems tense. Their answers are shorter. Their face looks different. Maybe they seem distant. For some people, the internal reaction is immediate. What did I do? But perhaps they slept badly. Perhaps they're worried about money. Perhaps they had an argument before you arrived. Perhaps they're overwhelmed by something they haven't told you. And yes, perhaps they really are upset with you. The point isn't to assume they aren't. The point is to stop assuming they are before you have evidence. Empathy says, something seems wrong. Personalization says, I must be the reason. Emotional maturity creates space between those two statements. You can notice someone's storm without immediately assuming you created the weather. The same thing happens when someone simply doesn't like you. This can be surprisingly difficult to accept because most of us want to believe that if we're kind enough, reasonable enough, or emotionally intelligent enough, people will respond positively to us. But human compatibility doesn't work that way. Two decent people can dislike each other. Your personality may feel warm to one person and overwhelming to another. Your directness may feel refreshing to someone and uncomfortable to someone else. Your quietness may seem peaceful to one person and distant to another. People experience you through their own personality, history, expectations, and values. That doesn't mean other people's opinions never matter. Sometimes criticism contains information you need. But not every negative opinion contains a lesson. Sometimes there is nothing to repair. There is simply no compatibility. And emotionally mature people gradually stop turning every instance of being disliked into a referendum on their worth. Disagreement can trigger the same reflex. Someone challenges your opinion, and suddenly it feels as though they're challenging your intelligence. Someone sees a situation differently and it feels like disrespect. Someone says, I don't agree, but internally you hear, there's something wrong with you. When identity becomes attached to every opinion, disagreement becomes threatening. But emotional maturity allows two ideas to exist at once. I can believe what I believe. And you can see it differently. A disagreement about your idea is not automatically a rejection of you as a person. Sometimes the most useful question is, are they actually rejecting me or are they simply disagreeing with something I believe? That distinction becomes even more important when other people set boundaries. Imagine asking a friend for help and hearing, I can't today. Your partner asks for some time alone. Someone declines an invitation. A coworker tells you they aren't available. The words may be simple, but insecurity can translate them into something much larger. I'm not important. They don't care about me. I'm becoming a burden. But another person's boundary may tell you far more about their capacity than your value. People have limited time, attention, emotional energy, responsibilities, and needs of their own. A boundary can limit your access to someone without measuring your importance to them. And learning to respect that protects relationships from an exhausting pattern, forcing other people to prove that their limits aren't secretly rejection. Then there is one of the biggest factories of personalization in modern life, your phone. A message goes unanswered. A reply seems shorter than usual. Someone was online but didn't respond. You notice the tone feels different. And within minutes, your mind can create an entire explanation from almost no information. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they're deliberately ignoring me. Digital communication creates enormous information gaps. You usually cannot see the person's expression, environment, workload, emotional state, or what happened 5 minutes before they received your message. Yet the less information you have, the more room insecurity has to fill in what is missing. Silence contains very little information. Your interpretation can contain an entire novel. But there is an important distinction here. Not taking things personally does not mean refusing to look at yourself. Sometimes criticism is accurate. Maybe you interrupted too much. Maybe you handled something poorly. Maybe your behavior hurt someone. Emotional maturity doesn't protect the ego from useful information. It protects your identity from becoming fused with that information. There is a difference between saying, "I made a mistake," and saying, "I am a failure." Between, "This behavior needs to change," and, "There is something fundamentally wrong with me." When criticism arrives, mature people learn to ask, "Is there something useful here? If there is, take it. Learn from it. Change what needs changing." But you don't have to turn one mistake into a definition of who you are. Being excluded can feel even more personal. You discover that friends met without you. You aren't included in a conversation. Someone else is chosen for an opportunity you wanted. The pain can be real. Human beings are deeply sensitive to belonging, so pretending exclusion doesn't hurt isn't maturity. But watch what the mind does next. One invitation you didn't receive becomes, "Nobody wants me." One group that didn't choose you becomes, "I don't belong anywhere." One closed door becomes evidence about your entire social worth. That's where an event becomes a conclusion. Emotionally mature people allow themselves to feel disappointment without automatically expanding its meaning. And if you've recognized yourself in any of these patterns, tell me in the comments which one you tend to take most personally. And if this is giving you something useful to think about, leave a like. It helps more people find these conversations. Another person's success can create a similar distortion. Someone receives the recognition you wanted. They get promoted. They're praised. They're chosen. And suddenly their good news feels like bad news about you. But their achievement is primarily information about their life. Someone else being chosen does not automatically mean you were rejected as a person. There may be something you can learn from their success. There may even be something you need to improve. But you can examine that without turning their moment into evidence of your inadequacy. The same principle becomes harder when relationships change. Someone who once contacted you every day becomes distant. A friendship becomes quieter. Someone's priorities shift. And the mind asks a painful question. Was I not enough? Sometimes you did contribute to the change, and maturity means being willing to see that. But relationships also change because people change. Lives move in different directions. Responsibilities grow. Needs evolve. Compatibility shifts. Instead of immediately becoming guilty, ask, what evidence do I actually have that this change is about me? That question doesn't remove responsibility. It makes responsibility more accurate. And this leads to perhaps the deepest version of taking things personally, believing that the way someone sees you is an objective description of who you are. It isn't. People don't encounter you with an empty mind. They bring previous relationships, expectations, insecurities, fears, values, and memories into the room. A behavior that reminds someone of a painful person from their past may trigger a reaction you never intended. Someone may interpret confidence as arrogance, caution as weakness, independence as rejection. This doesn't mean every uncomfortable reaction is merely someone else's projection. That would be another way of avoiding responsibility. The mature position is more balanced. What part of this belongs to me and what part doesn't? You don't need to accept all the blame. And you don't need to reject all of it. You need enough self-awareness to separate what is yours from what someone else brought into the interaction. So the next time something feels painfully personal, try a simple filter. First, what actually happened? Describe only what you could observe. They didn't reply. They disagreed with me. They said no. Then ask, what meaning did I add? They don't care. They don't respect me. I'm not important. Finally, what evidence tells me that interpretation is true? And if the evidence isn't clear, ask one more question. Is there another explanation that fits the same facts? That small pause can change everything. Because emotional maturity often lives in the space between what happened and what you decided it meant. The unanswered message may still disappoint you. The criticism may still sting. Being excluded may still hurt. Someone changing may still make you sad. The goal was never to become insensitive. Sometimes something really is personal. Sometimes someone is upset with you. Sometimes criticism is deserved. Sometimes your behavior needs to change. But emotional maturity means you stop convicting yourself before the evidence arrives. You become curious before becoming defensive. You investigate before assuming. You separate someone's reaction from your identity. And gradually you discover something freeing. Not everything that affects you is about you. So ask yourself one final question. What have you been taking personally that may never have been entirely about you? Share your answer in the comments, and if this video gave you something worth thinking about, leave a like. Then click the video appearing on your screen right now. We'll continue exploring the hidden psychological patterns shaping the way you think, feel, and relate to the people around you. You don't need to become less sensitive. You need to become more accurate about what your sensitivity means. I'll see you there.